Some would talk about this, about passing it on. Fundamentally, this is about the intergenerational transfer of wealth, but that's, I don't know, not as catchy as pass it on, I think. And fundamentally, it is about passing it on. But the question is kind of what's the thing that we're passing on? And one of the things that I think, come out of this research, and they talked to, there was a survey of 1,000 representative people throughout the country and some experts and things like that. It was a conversation about what the idea of kind of legacy means and what people think about it and the stuff that they want to pass on. The difficulty is, of course, that actually it's been weird lately. Hasn't it? Quite weird. What with the whole pandemic thing? And everyone was kind for a bit, and then we got bored and angry about being kind, and can't say being kind anymore, because shut up, I don't want to be kind. And then it was all going fine, and then all those people, they came to Wellington and went camping, and I thought, that's nice, people, getting together and just sharing a worldview and then they burnt all their stuff, which made no sense at all. I think there's a bunch of people that probably had a terrible Christmas holidays because they went to get their camping stuff out and they thought, we burnt everything, didn't we? So, and then it's what was that? And then there's freaking the Ukraine and interest rates, and we have rain anxiety now in Auckland. It used to be just the rain, and now it rains and you think, is it going to flood? And everything just feels terrible and stressful and difficult, and everyone's under the gun, and everyone's hammered. And whenever you go anywhere talking to everyone feels stressed and burdened, and it's problematic and all the rest of it. So it's actually really difficult in the middle of all of that to have a conversation with people about stuff like assets and legacy and those sorts of things. But fundamentally, this is sort of a conversation about, I think, how do you help communities to flourish? Because the way that we flourish is we just, over the course of our life, we accumulate stuff and we accumulate wisdom and we accumulate a whole bunch of things. And then at some point, we start to think about how can we pass that on to other people in some way. So when I sort of looked at what it is that people think about all of this stuff, public trusts seem to be a reasonable organisation to be having this conversation with people. They've been in the business of this stuff for quite a long time, ever since Julius loomed up from behind this very building with his laser beam eyes and saw all the little widows and orphans and went, that's not good, we should do something about that. I didn't know that it was the actual building. I've spent ages trying to get the laser beams on those eyes just right. People go, you must be really busy. It's yeah, I spent half a day on those laser beams. That's what I do. That's why I'm busy. So Public Trust commissioned this bit of research, but really I think what it's about, there's a bigger, broader, more important conversation that we all need to have. And the difficult thing about that is this is difficult to get people talking about the stuff. One of the things that was really obvious, I think, from the data, and there's a whole bunch of data, basically, just for me, it's just about little circles and big circles. So this is going to be a series of circles, really, because I can't remember stuff. I can just remember the gist of things. It is a really interesting bit of stuff. If you're interested, I think it is worth having a chat to these guys about actually going through the deck of things, but I'm just going to give you the circles. So fundamentally, 98% of people want to leave a legacy of some description, like we do. The thing that interests me, as soon as I saw that, I thought, what's going on with the 2% that don't want to leave a legacy? What happens to you in your life that you go, do you want to leave behind a legacy for your children and your family and your community? And then, nah, not really. Nah, I'm good. I don't really care. They're the ones I personally am interested in, but there you go. What happens to a person to make you think, if someone says, do you want to leave something for your community? No, nothing at all? No, I'm good. Yeah. So 98% of people want to leave some kind of legacy, right? Now, most people, 85% of people want to leave an emotional legacy. So an emotional legacy is things like this, values and happiness and a good upbringing. That's the sort of the human stuff that we want to leave. It's the stuff that we want to kind of pass on to our children and the values and the things that we care about. Something like 71% are interested in leaving the physical legacy of stuff as well. And it's I want my mum to leave an emotional legacy, but I would quite like a share of the actual other bit as well. It's a real thing, I think. Particularly given the sort of the financial difficulties that people are kind of facing in the world. And so 42% of people want to leave both, right? So there's that. But the paradox is, right, is because there's layers of the thing. So when you sort of ask people who have received some sort of stuff from the people that have passed on, 51% of people that received some sort of financial legacy reported an increase in their well-being, so it made them feel better. And a bigger number reported an increase in their well-being once they received, so that sort of emotional legacy, values, upbringing, that kind of stuff. Where it gets tricky and interesting, though, is that because the landscape is changing and things are difficult now, so something like 40% of millennials own a home, and of that 40%, 95% of them needed help to get there. So it's never been more important for people to get help to sort of get ahead. And there are lots and lots of young people, they just won't. They're not going to get there. And it's not because they're all drinking lattes. Like, you can't not drink lattes your way into a house. Like, no one's ever sort of, we could have just gone up a little bit more at that auction if we hadn't had that latte last week. Like, that's the kind of thing that people sort of my age say if they're just sort of like, oh, the young people. Basically, it's like when I bought a house, I think it was 4.5 times the average wage. Now it's, 10 times the average wage? You can't latte yourself up through all of that. So that stuff is all changing. Like, increasingly people are needing help from this sort of family and the community to get places and do stuff. And we're seeing this, like, it's everything. Inequality is increasing, but weirdly more people think that it doesn't apply to, the inequality isn't kind of affecting them. So all of that stuff is starting to change. And when you look at the paradox is that when you look at what happens to people who did receive stuff, so for people who did receive something from their family, 57% of people, that asset wasn't protected at all. Like, not at all. And then the circles get weird and even more frightening. So it's like, I think 17% there was some sort of contract around the stuff. So these are people that received some sort of asset legacy. And then wills of this particular group, it was like 9%. And then I think it goes down to some sort of prenups with 6% and contracting out agreements were about 3%. So it's like, the weird thing is, like, we want to give people our legacy. We want to give them stuff. We want to give them kind of, physical things, money and stuff. And we also want to give them kind of emotional things and leave that kind of stuff. And it does make us feel better, but actually we're not doing a very good job at protecting and looking after all of that stuff. There's sort of that big gap there. I think that's the paradox. The sort of, we know that receiving stuff, whether it be emotional stuff or physical stuff, is good for people. It makes us feel better. It improves our lives. It makes life easier. But actually, we're not that great at protecting it or thinking about it. And to understand why that is, you have to understand basically humans. Because humans are great, but as you all know, we do have our limitations. And so the name for, I think our name, our species name, is Homo sapiens, which means the wise human. But we're not really, are we? Like, that's an aspirational goal, I think, that we're wise humans, but I don't think it's an actual thing that we can say the default state for humans is that we are wise. Like, you spend any amount of time looking at anything on the internet, it's like, no, we're not wise at all. Like, we're basically just muppets. So we are quite amazing. Like, the human brain is amazing, and it's basically, we're still running a Stone Age brain. Like, we've only been around for about, humans, maybe a couple of 100,000 years. So our brains haven't changed in all that time. So all of this we've built with this kind of Stone Age brain. And it does a whole lot of really good things. But the problem is that when it comes to humans, we kind of tend to go where we look. And so for a long time, kind of when psychology tried to understand people, the idea was that, past experiences were sort of driven by past experiences. And so things like, memories are things that we store in a file cabinet and we pull them out, and that's the thing that happened, and then we go forward from there. But in fact, that's not the case. Memories aren't stored like in a filing cabinet. What happens is things happen to us, they come into our brain, and a bit of your brain called the hippocampus splits that up into different bits and stores it. And then when you need to retrieve that information a bit later on, it doesn't retrieve a carbon copy of that actual thing. What it does is it takes that past information and it sort of builds it together, affected by the context that you're currently in, to help you make a decision about what you're going to do next. Basically, our brains are always generating an algorithm to help us to do what's going to happen next. And it's when people say they remember things that never happened. So I think last year, I was supposed to be going out to the Bay of Islands for a thing, and the flight got cancelled, so I had to drive up. I stopped off in Whangarei for a night at this motel, got a room there, and the woman at the front desk said, "Oh, we've met before." I went, "Oh, have we?" She went, "Yeah, that Springbok game." I went, "No, I don't think we've met. Don't think we've." She said, "Yeah, no, we definitely was at a Springbok game. You were there, Springbok for the All Blacks. It was 19, and it was, and you were like, way," and I was like, "Whoa," and I said, "No, I've never actually been to an All Blacks match in my life at all. I once was outside one because we were filming and we filmed the crowd stuff, and then like the rest of the guys are going in to film from the sidelines the stuff, and I could have stood on the sidelines and like watched the whole game, and I just said, "Oh, like, do you need me? I just want to go home and watch a bit of telly, actually." So like I knew that I hadn't ever met this person at a Springbok game. Didn't happen, but I think, was still, like, even as I was leaving the thing, she's going, "We definitely did. You'll remember it later." No, we really didn't. Emotions, emotions aren't just a reaction to stuff that's happened. Emotions basically help us to generate the stuff that comes next. And so what happens when you look at things like anxiety and depression, that isn't about, these things in the past. When you look at people's thoughts around anxiety and depression, what that is that it's the algorithm, the predictions they're making about the stuff that comes next. If you're clinically depressed, you're making a number of predictions about what's going to happen next. And it's not so much about this stuff, it's about the predictions you're making about the stuff that comes along. And so there's a whole bunch of complicated stuff in there, but fundamentally this idea that we are these sort of creatures who are, the stuff that happens here, and that's a blueprint for blah, blah, blah. It kind of is, but we're a bit like Google in the sense that all of the things that have happened to us, all of our experiences, all of our memories, all of that stuff, we are putting that together all the time to make a predictive kind of model about what to do next. That's why there's a thing called the default system. So when you're doing nothing, your brain is just a whole bunch of centres start to hum up that take that past experience and creativity and meaning and all that kind of stuff and start to generate ideas below the surface. That's how sometimes you can be like, I don't know, in the shower or walking along the beach or something like that, and you go, "Oh, I could do that thing." That idea that just sort of comes to you, and it comes to you because that default state is taking past experiences and trying to generate future solutions for that stuff. So that's how we can have things like intuition. That's how we can kind of react quite quickly for stuff, because the default state is to be thinking about all of that. So what happens is that we tend to go where we look, right? We tend to go towards the things that we're focusing on. One of the we've done a bunch of filming in a bunch of different places, and a whole bunch of different people have talked about this idea that we go where we look. So we did this thing a few years ago with a teenage driving, and we had this day with this rally driving instructor dude, and he was talking about how, one of the things you need to teach young drivers is that we go where we look. So for most people, they come around a corner and there's a bus and a tree, they either look at the bus or they look at the tree, and that's where you go. He said, what you have to do is you have to teach people to look for the gap, like you look for the place that you want to go. We film with helicopter pilots, same deal. It's like when you're flying a helicopter, there's all the gadgetry and palaver, but fundamentally what you're doing is you're looking at the place that you want to go. Whitewater kayaking people, they don't look at the rocks, they look at the gap between the rocks. So we tend to gravitate towards the places that we go. When you're depressed, you're making predictions about things that will happen, and you're going to go towards a feeling of depression that's generated from that stuff. Now, the problem when it comes to all of this stuff is that death is a bummer. And fundamentally, when you're talking about this, what you're saying to people is, hey, you're going to freaking die. You should think about that. What are you going to do with your stuff when you're dead? And they'll be thinking, I don't know. Because it is pretty grim. We don't want to think about all of that stuff. And most of us don't, most of the time. One of the things that happens, I think, particularly in kind of, in sort of the world, is that we just pretend we're going to live forever. And it's not us. But if you actually start calculating the amount of time that you have left, I'm 55, it's not that much. But what happens is we don't want to be thinking about all of that. We don't want to be thinking about some of that future stuff. It's also hard too because people are under all of this pressure. And like I said at the beginning, people are. People are worried and stressed about all sorts of things. And that's even before we start talking about AI and blah, all that kind of stuff. So, death is a bummer. So the thing is that if we go where we look, where are we currently looking? And when it comes to this conversation about talking with people about how they're going to pass stuff on, the emotional stuff, the physical stuff, we're kind of looking at this big empty hole. Like we're not dealing with that stuff. We're not doing it. There are large numbers of people that don't. If I was to go around the room, there will be people in this room that don't have their affairs in order. If we did that little... I never ask people to do stuff because everyone hates that. Imagine if I said to you now, just turn to the person next to you and you'd think, oh, No one ever at any talk ever wants to turn to the person next to them and do freaking anything. So I would never ask you to do that. I hate it. I know you hate it. But if I was to do that, undoubtedly there were people in this room that haven't got their affairs quite in order, right? And we're here celebrating 150 years of a place whose business is the stuff. And so you have some association with that kind of world, but there's still going to be people that don't. So how do we kind of get people thinking about and focusing on the things that matter? When the people in this particular bit of research were asked, like, who feels like their physical stuff is really well protected, only 15% of people thought they had really good protection in place for that stuff. And as anyone who's a lawyer knows, the only protection matters is that really good protection. Like, it's okay. Like, that really doesn't fly. For the emotional kind of legacy stuff, about 21%. So it's like, people don't have that stuff protected. We don't protect it, we don't have that kind of stuff. And we know that there are gains for people when they do. There's a well-being gain that people get from receiving stuff. The value stuff, the emotional stuff, there's a clear thing. For the physical stuff, it's that. For the value stuff, it's that. And we know that 98% of people want to leave some sort of legacy. We do. It's this weird sort of human thing that we want to do. And so how do we get people to start thinking about now? Some of you may think, holy crap, is that Roger Douglas? It's not Roger Douglas. I should have given you a trigger warning, actually, because some people might have been triggered by that. I basically don't believe in trigger warnings. I think people just need to harden up a little bit because everyone gets triggered by everything these days. Calm down. That was Martin Seligman, actually. So the way forward, I think, with this stuff is it's like we have to find ways to engage people in things that don't feel onerous or difficult. Nobody wants more stuff to do. If the only way that we can actually start having a conversation with people about thinking about their futures and thinking about their current situation is to give them more stuff to do, they're not going to do it. No one has ever gone to a conference and said, here's a list of 5 things that if you do them, no one wants to do that. When they do a talk on stress management, and the person just goes, just exercise more. I think, just shut up. Like, I'm not going to exercise more. Like, if that's don't give me stuff to do. No one wants any more stuff to do. So what I think we have to do is find ways to engage people in conversations about their futures and about the people around them in ways that actually are meaningful and that feel good. And so Martin Seligman, who looks a bit like Roger Douglas but isn't. So Martin Seligman was about 20 years ago, he came up with this idea of positive psychology. Because for ages, what we'd done is effectively we'd looked at misery. And we'd spent a long time looking at misery. And what we discovered is that it's fine, but it's kind of got its limits. And for most of the time, for a long time, that's what clinicians did. We looked at anxiety and depression and what that is and learned some things about it. But fundamentally, what we learned is that misery is pretty miserable, and there are different kinds of it. And if you want to make misery, you just take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you just sort of just heap it up together. Just leave it out in the sun for a bit long, or just leave it in the fridge for way too long, and eventually you'll just get really miserable, and that's quite bad. So Seligman said, well, hang on, I just think we should, I don't know if that's like necessarily the best way of doing things. I think maybe what we should do is we should start looking at what actually makes people happy. Now, as soon as he said that, everyone went, Martin Seligman, A, you look like Roger Douglas, also, you are Matt. Like, no one's going to, what a flippant and silly thing to do. What makes people happy? No one's going to want to study that. And so he got sort of broadly ridiculed at the time. Now he's one of the most heavily funded psychologists on the planet. The positive psychology stuff, and you all will have come across it in various ways at various times, that stuff has become huge because it works. Because lo and behold, when you start looking at what actually makes people feel better, when you're looking at that, you start to feel better. You can talk forever about stuff that may or may not, from your past, that may or may not have contributed to you feeling bad now, but none of that stuff will actually help you to feel better. If you're a shrink and you're a bit tired and you want an easy session, you just say to someone, oh, tell me about your dad. That'll fill in an hour. Like, even if it's a good dad. So what Seligman did is he started looking at what are the things that actually make people happy. And I think that's the stuff that has some real value in it for all of this stuff. So he came up with this idea of PERMA. It's a really sort of simple little anagram that kind of evidence-based stuff that makes people feel happy. And when I'm talking about happy, I'm not talking about that sort of a nauseating, annoying, people who are just happy in an annoying way, like all the time happy, to the point that you think we should drug test that person at work because you can't. And there's some people are naturally like that, and that's great, but for most of us, we can't manage that. So when Seligman and when psychologists are talking about happiness, we're talking about that sense of kind of sort of contentment and well-being, not like happy, happy, happy all the time, because that's just not sustainable. It's like, how do you have a sense of kind of well-being and contentment in your life, more so than not? And so one of the things that, the first thing is this idea of positive emotions, right? So it's people experiencing positive emotions. And the positive emotions are things like love and gratitude, those sorts of things. Gratitude's a really interesting thing when we sort of start thinking about the stuff that we're grateful for in our lives that makes us feel better. That's that stuff about, you write down 3 things you feel grateful for each day. It's evidence-based. If you do that, if you keep a little gratitude diary and every night you write down 3 things that make you happy or that you're grateful for that day, then over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, your mood actually increases. And that's not just sort of TikTok stuff. That's actually, it's a thing. It's an evidence-based thing. Interestingly, how Seligman has changed that now, how he's kind of developed that, is that rather than writing down 3 things that I feel grateful for today, what you should do is think about 3 things that you're going to feel grateful for at the end of tomorrow. Now, I'm never going to keep a gratitude diary. Most people aren't. Some people will. That's a great idea. Oh, sure, keep a gratitude diary. But most of us won't. But if you do that kind of stuff, it works. When we kind of experience love and compassion and empathy and gratitude, that stuff makes us feel better. So that stuff is really important. The next bit is the engaged bit. And engaged is the idea of kind of flow. And flow is just doing things that sort of bring us pleasure, doing things that we enjoy. Now, most things that humans do for fun are just ridiculous. All sports are ridiculous when you think about it. Tennis is a ridiculous sport. It is a silly, silly, silly sport. And I say that because I've never really done tennis, but my partner's kids are into tennis, and it's a freaking nightmare because they've got this weird scoring system, and just when you think you're out, they do this juice love thing, and it's like you're back to zero. It's a nightmare. But it's basically just bopping a little ball backwards and forwards. Even our national game, rugby, I know it's a thing, but if you actually think about it, it's quite silly, because what we do is we say, right, you lot stand there, we're going to stand here, we're going to take this improbably shaped ball. Soccer, they've got round ones, but no, we're not going that way, we're going this one. Very unpredictable. You try and get it there, and we'll try and get it there, and if you get it there more than we get it there, the entire country will fall into depression and despair, and alcohol use will go up, and family violence, and we're all just going to lose our minds, basically, if the All Blacks lose a test match. Most of the stuff that we do is just, it's a bit silly, but we do it because it's fun. Guys my age that get into cycling, and they get up and they put their Lycra stuff on a Sunday, and they go out there sort of zooming around their bikes, thinking that the you don't need the Lycra because it's not wind resistance is your problem. Like, you could wear a box, mate, and you wouldn't, like, just be honest. You're going cycling so you can meet your friends and have a coffee and get a few hours out of the house. Like, I get it, but let's just call it that. All of that stuff is kind of a bit silly. But we like doing it because we just like doing it. There is something that humans quite like about doing stuff that we like with people that we like, which is kind of the next bit as well. It leads into the no surprise, like, relationships are really important. One of the most important things for our sense of well-being is our relationships with other people. And I'll get to in a minute, I think, how this applies to a conversation about talking to people about their legacy and things. But we're made to connect with other people. The health benefit of loneliness is the same as the health benefit of smoking. Like, it's really bad for us. We have to connect with other people. It's really important. And when we do, in these sort of meaningful relationships, we feel better. The meaning thing, like, that's been around for a long time. Like, lots of cultures have talked about this idea of meaning as being important. If anyone's read that fantastic book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, he's an Austrian psychiatrist, survived 4 concentration camps in World War II. And Viktor Frankl, basically, he concluded from the kind of his experiences in the camps and surviving for them, is that the meaning of life is to find meaning in life. We're a meaning-driven species. We have to find meaning in our... If we find meaning in our suffering, then we grow from it. If we can't find meaning in suffering, then we fall into despair. And the last thing is a sense of achievement, right? The last thing in PERMA is achievement. It's doing stuff, right? And that doesn't have to be, I've climbed a mountain or I've, built an empire of whatever. It's kind of what's wrong with the world at the moment. Everything is social media this, and like, you're a complete failure if you haven't built an empire or climbed some mountain or having this amazing meal at some amazing place, because people just put the best bits of their life up. They don't put all the shitty, boring, normal bits of, like, we don't have any milk, or we're out of toilet paper, or like, got to pick up the dog poo, the lawn guy's coming tomorrow, it's dark and I don't have a torch. That's a nightmare, take it from me. So here's the thing, the PERMA stuff, where I think that's useful is, like, this is evidence-based stuff, right? So this is the stuff that we know makes people feel better. If we have a sense of experiencing positive emotions, if we're engaged in stuff and we get into that kind of flow state of doing stuff that we enjoy, if we're thinking about and experiencing kind of relationships, if we have meaning and we're making achievements throughout our life, and small things, big things, whatever, that's the stuff that makes us feel better. And so fundamentally, I think when we're talking about how do you engage people in a conversation about this idea of kind of legacy and about the stuff that comes next, when you think about all of the information that came out of the data, the stuff that I keep coming back to is this, like, big old circle. It's like 98% of people do. Like, we do. We just do. When we think if we become ill or if we lose someone, we stop and think about the stuff that's important, right? When someone dies, we all stop and we think, and we go, I got to reevaluate my life. I got to do some things differently. I'm going to stop doing some of the things that I don't like doing, and I'm going to spend more time with the people that I care about. And then what happens is, we do that for a little bit, and then it's emails and phone calls and work and obligations and everything else, and it just becomes much harder, and it sucks all of that stuff away. And so we do want to leave a legacy. We do want to help the people around us. I know kindness, you're not allowed to say it anymore, but it's the default state for the human race. Like, we're not selfish and self-interested. We are, at our centre, kind. We're made to connect with and to help other people. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you fall over, someone's going to come and ask you if you're all right. That's just what we do. It's why, when stories come on the news about people having hard, difficult times, people give them money. We made a documentary a few years ago about inequality, and we interviewed a Samoan family where the mum had to basically pawn like a really important sort of family heirloom, and people just started chucking money at us. Like, that's what we kept it all, obviously, because we're telling people we're awful. No, we didn't. We gave it all to people. Like, there's completely, they were anonymous, but they said we're going to put in. I think they put in like $50 a week for the next year, so that these guys can just go out once a week and do something fun and nice together as a family. Like, that's what we do. And so fundamentally, we do want to help, and we do want to leave a legacy, and we do want to connect with the people around us. And so I think what we have to do is start changing that conversation with people. So rather than it being just about words on bits of paper, because no disrespect to probably the many lawyers in the room, but for most of us, lawyers are worse than when you have to spend money on your car, because at least you spend money on your car and they say, oh, the defibrillator clutch sprocket needs replacing. You think, oh yeah, okay, well at least the defibrillator clutch will be a thing. But when you have to spend money on lawyery stuff, which is bits of words or bits of paper that go in a drawer, for most civilians, it just feels like, well, that's just... But you all know, and I know that City Public Trust knows, just the car wreck and the difficulties that it causes for people when they haven't thought through that stuff. Because you may not care about it, but that's not how the world works. Incidentally, there was a whole bunch of stuff in this bit of research about Māori, and some research and data on that, and some... My position on all of that is that basically whenever white dudes with beards tell Māori what they should do with their assets, it usually ends quite badly for them. So I'm just going to keep my sticky beak well clear of that whole world. I don't really think there's anything that I should be involved in. But I think everyone needs to think about this big question about how do we help communities to flourish and how do we help people to flourish. It isn't thinking about it in terms of bits of paper and getting your affairs in order and all that kind of stuff. It's thinking about it in terms of, how can we help people to have positive feelings and positive emotions as a result of this process, right? Thinking about how you're going to help the people that you care about. The relationships part is easy because it is about thinking about the relationships. It's about who are the people in my family and how will I make sure that they're all right. The meaning part, that's also kind of part of this thing, right? For most of us, the meaning of our lives is we just want to make sure that our kids and our families are better. If they're happy, we're happy. If they're not, we're not. And that sense of achievement can also come from this idea of getting things kind of sorted for people. And it shouldn't be just this idea that it's a thing that sits in a drawer, because all of that stuff, it's a conversation and it's a narrative about the people that we care about and our ideas for their future and their ideas for their future. And yeah, there'll be family conflicts and difficulties and stuff, but that's all stuff that's quite good to work through. So, I think that's the question, really, for all of us. It's how do you encourage people to do that kind of stuff? I do think we can't think about it in terms of a list of jobs or things to do. It has to be, how do we tie this idea of kind of legacy into those really positive things about connection with people that we care about and looking after the people that we care about. And experiencing that now, it's nice to know that you've looked after the people that you care about.